Welcome to Tartaria. Today, on another episode of Mystery History, where we explore history's greatest mysteries. Today, we are going to explore a lot more about this giants, because just found a lot more pictures. So, we're going to explore those. Really cool stuff. A lot of cool pictures. And I got another one of these declassified CIA documents that says it's been sanitized. So definitely with these CIA documents you don't get the whole story. But still, really interesting information I'm going to go through. Got some of that. So I want to thank all the new subscribers and all the wonderful comments. They're going to help my videos become better and better. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So many wonderful comments. This information is going to go into my videos. Thank you so much. So let's get going. That one is neat. That picture. It's the roof of a house so deep in a layer of earth. Amazing. Another really interesting picture where you don't see any plants or trees or nothing in the background. This is really deep. Very interesting. More pictures of these windows and doors underground level as people are digging up for like repairs and digging up the streets and so forth and repairing buildings. Oh, that is neat. See under the door there's another bricked up door, older. All windows and doors, yeah, another windows and doors, completely underground level. Does that look normal? Is it normal to build doors and windows underground level? I don't know. I don't think so. This is super interesting. I love these old pictures of boat, like, castles. Boat villages. I've got a few of them. Here's a tartaria flags. Very interesting. More giant doors. Really cool old paintings of, looks like ruins of these ancient buildings. They've got growing things like plants on them and everything. Another old symbols of Tartaria. old painting picture drawing of Belbeck. Big giant door. They have a support in the middle of that. They made a new brick. Here's an old picture of Nashville, Tennessee. Pretty interesting. I like the pyramid. Really great. I got some more pictures later on. More of these beautiful giant doors. Probably made of brass. Italy. Just make some giant brass doors. Could be neat. Just amazing. Giant, amazing, beautiful. Just wow. Can't imagine they destroyed a lot of these buildings as we've been talking about. Just really amazing. Here's the ancient Petra. I love those. They're cool. And they have, again, giant doors. Carved. Giant M building. Whatever that is. Looks cool. So we got all these giant book pictures. I've shown this one before. I just love this one. It's just so neat looking. I found some new ones. Here's a new one. Really interesting, really giant books. Just amazing. Super giant. Another new picture. Very giant books. Seems like we got a lot of them. See a music book there. Giant music book. Old drawing. Looks like the place is kind of flooded. And a really super giant building. Super giant. Again, this is like, what is that? Like Chicago, giant buildings. They're again torn down. All over the world, we got these giant, beautiful buildings, Greek-like. And they just tore a lot of them down. A lot of the remaining ones just become like government buildings. Here's a new picture, really interesting, really great. Looks like all these World Fair buildings mixed with some pyramids. Just amazing. I've shown this one before, but I just had to put it next to the other one. Really neat. You got this like tower of whatever it is. Could be maybe some kind of Tesla tower. Who knows? We don't know. This is Mexico. I love this picture. I've shown it a few times. Just love it so much. Really, really weird and interesting. Looks like Atlantis. Again, we got some giant, more giant mountains that look like people. Really, really interesting. And then I also looked up whale bones and like on top of mountains. A lot of whale bones are found on top of mountains. And seashells too, and all sorts of sea animals, bones, and fossils you'll find on top of mountains. And even in deserts. Also, this suggesting it could be a flood. Could be other reasons, but could be a flood. I mean, we got seashells and whale bones everywhere. Top of mountains, deserts. Other aquatic animals. Oh, and then we got giant, in Peru, we got giant clams. Like 11 feet wide, I think. Super giant, as you can see. Really, really neat. And this is also 2 miles up above sea level. 2 miles above. And they're all giant. Really interesting. Giant oysters. 5,000 fossilized giant oysters found 2 miles above sea level. 11 feet wide, 660 pounds. Just amazing. 2 miles above sea level. Whoa. Seashells in the mountains. On the Grand Canyon, we also got seashells, fossils everywhere. Very interesting. Deserts, mountains, Grand Canyon. So that sounds like a pretty big flood. Ancient giant clam. We're digging up. This is pretty neat. This is all fossilized food. Very interesting. Fossilized. Looks like a pie. Not sure if there's a bread or cake or something fossilized. Some food. Metals get fossilized too. They can turn to stone as well. So that's really interesting. Interesting too. So metals and machines could get all fossilized, and we could look at them. They might look like a rock, but they once could have been a metal or even machine. Now it looks like a rock. Here's some bolts. It's turned to stone, but you can see that was some bolts. Big giant bolts. Definitely looks like that was like metal at one point. Very interesting. See, to me it looks like it used to be metal. Really interesting. Could be many other reasons though, of course. That looks, again, like used to be metal. interesting. Whatever it used to be, or however they made it. Very curious. This is interesting too. It got a lot of mud fossils. They call these mud fossils. Are these the mud fossils of animals and giants and people? And see, this looks like this guy still got the skin texture of the animal still on it, which is really interesting. You see that in these. Could be mud fossils. Again, there's a channel called Mud Fossil University where this guy sent in some of these. He sent in some like thumbs and a lung, it's like giant fingertips, fossilized giant fingertips, and he got them DNA tested, and they came back. They successfully extracted DNA from these giant from these stone giant fingertips, and I got the results in here too, some pictures, and it's really interesting. So a lot of these rocks used to be living animals and people. At least could be. I mean, we don't know for sure. All of them, they're not all tested, of course, but we can test them. Just people willing to go out and get samples and pay for it. Really interesting stuff. It really looks like fossilized elephants and other animals. Of course, you can say some of them could have been statues. But you really have to wonder if they're fossilized animals and not just a statue. There's all sorts of animals and people out there looking. Some of them are so giant it would be hard to even imagine carving these giant. 16 giants dug up by workmen with 7-foot skeletons. So all of them were above 7 feet. St. Louis. Workmen digging up excavation. One of the skeletons walled up in a stone tomb 8 feet high. Apparently a man 7 feet tall. 15 men were all above 7 feet. Giant swords. At the museum in Cleveland, we got giant swords like this being displayed. Giant samurai swords. Really cool. Super giant. There's a person. Super giant sword. More of these giant axes. Here's the fingertip or the long and fingertip that were DNA tested, I believe. Yeah, here's a fingertip. So this guy sent samples to a couple different DNA labs, I think, and one lab didn't want to do it, but this one did, and they successfully extracted DNA from the stone mud fossils, apparently, of a giant fingertip, and successfully extracted human DNA. Pretty amazing. 36-inch fingertip. Just the tip. 36 inches big. That is a giant fingertip. And the stone lung, also, they successfully extracted DNA from. So it's Mud Fossil University. Go check his videos out. Really interesting. So yeah, this is some pretty interesting stuff that they successfully extracted the DNA from these stones. Again, in our history, we've got a lot of ancient cultures have stories about everything being giant, and again, look at our fossils, they just get bigger and bigger. As you go back in time, you got giant plants, and in my last video we talked about the giant forest in the bottom of coal mines, and they're not really a forest, it's all the plants you would see on the bottom of a forest. But they're really, really giant, 200 feet tall, 100 feet tall, giant bugs. In those coal mines, big as cars. Big as cars. But you might think that's scary because you might think, oh my god, bugs big as cars, but back then you might have been a giant 2 miles tall. And a bug might, to you, still is bug sized. Because you're just so giant back then. As everything else was. So a lot of people might think like, oh, scary, everything was giant, but it might just look exactly like it does now. Then in the stories, after the time of giants, there was a time of giants and little people. So we got lots of stories of giants and little people all mixed together. Very interesting. And we got also, in ancient stories, we got animal people too, all sorts of mixtures. Very interesting, different species, dragons, and all these mythical creatures. Maybe a lot of them were real. Who knows? But we got all these giant mud fossil things are really interesting. A lot of people should be testing more of them, like the Mud Fossil University guy. A lot of these we should test them all, as many as we can. It'd be fun. So I want to read a little bit of this declassified CIA document that was sanitized, so it's probably not the whole truth, of course. But still very interesting. I'm going to read some of it. Here we go. So this, the rumble so low, growing, throbbing, fuming, thundering roar, earthquake starts. It's not like any earthquake in record history. In California, the mountains shake like ferns in a breeze. Pacific rears back and piles up into a mountain of water more than 2 miles high and starts to race eastward. With the force of 1,000 armies, wind attacks, ripping and shredding everything within a supersonic bombardment. The unbelievable mountain Pacific Sea water follows the wind eastward, bearing Los Angeles, San Francisco, if but grains of sand. Across the continent, 1,000-mile-per-hour wind wrecks its unholy vengeance everywhere. Pretty crazy event this is describing. Within 3 hours, the fantastic wall of water moves across the continent, burying the wind-ravaged land under 2 miles of seething water, coast to coast, in a fraction of a day. All vestiges of civilization are gone. The great cities, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, New York, are nothing but legends. Barely a stone left where millions just walked a few hours before. A few lucky ones managed to find shelter. North America is not alone in her death throes. Central America suffered the same. South America finds Andes not high enough to stop the cataclysm. Brazil are shaken madly by the devastation, earthquake buried by molten fire. And water, miles of water, turned into a frozen hell afterwards. Less than 4 hours. Europe cannot escape the onslaught. The raging Atlantic piles higher and higher upon itself, screeching eastward. The Alps, Urals, Scandinavian mountains are shaken. Congo, South Africa, Kenya suffers only severe earthquakes and winds. It's interesting. Siberia and the Orient, they suffer annihilation too as well. So things were covered by unbelievable amounts of mud. East of Urals in western Siberia, a few lucky people survived the fantastic winds and quakes. Oh, that's interesting. Some survivors over there. This lasts for 6 days and 6 nights. During the 6th day, the ocean starts to settle. Their new homes running off the high grounds. On the 7th day, the rampage is over. The Arctic age is ended and a new Stone Age begins. The ocean, the great Mpgun, has laid down another deep layer of mud over the existing strata. After this, we join Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis, Mu, Olympus, and Jesus, Cyrus, Zeus, Vishnu. So I looked this guy up, and what he means by this Atlantis, Mu, and stuff, he's a scientist that studied like cataclysms, and he wrote a bunch of books and stuff about it. And he said like Adam and Eve are in a specific era where a restart happened. In Atlantis, that stands for to him a certain era and timeline and a civilization, and then a restart happened. Mu was a different restart. Olympus was a different restart. Jesus was a different restart. Osiris was a different restart. Zeus was a different restart. Vishnu was a different restart. So he's saying after this cataclysm, we join Noah, Adam and Eve, Atlantis and Mu. He's referring to all these different restarts he's researched in his theory. So his theory is all these different names are a completely different civilization and a completely different restart, and now we join them. Really interesting document. Now remember, this is a sanitized copy, so we don't know what we're reading. So just an interesting story. Just is more to think about in this theory. So what do we got here? A really cool pyramid just in the middle of the woods. Really cool. Some more giant footprints. Love those. Giant footprints. I really like the one comment in my other video. Someone commented that it looks like Atlantis was everywhere. I like that theory too. Like, we couldn't find, we're looking everywhere for Atlantis. Like, is this Atlantis? Is this underwater city Atlantis? Is that underwater city Atlantis? And we have all these, in other comments mentioned, we've got a lot of underwater cities on the coastlines all around the world. And we do, like China, India, a lot of different places around the world. We've got stone structures and roads and underwater cities. Really, really interesting. And another person commented about how mainstream scientists looked at the ice core samples, and they said back in time there was a lot more oxygen. And then I looked into that. I read some articles about how scientists did some experiments with bugs where they gave the bugs a lot more oxygen and some fish a lot more oxygen, and they successfully made like really, really big bugs and fish by like adding more oxygen. So it's really interesting. Let's see, what do we got here? We got old paintings and pictures and drawings of giants in the landscape, just like we've been seeing these mountains. These are old drawings and paintings. Pretty interesting. They got little cities and everything. Pretty interesting. Got a bunch of them. So it's interesting that that scientists. So he's saying there was many restarts and many different civilization restarts that happen. So it's really interesting. Sleeping giants. Yeah, some people commented they're thinking this this mud flood event was the big event from the Bible flood. I thought about that too a lot, but I don't know. It could be. It could be multiple events throughout history where multiple restarts happen. I don't know. It's very interesting to think about. Very interesting, all the Bible flood myths in the book of Enoch. Again, in the book of Enoch, got these giants. They're getting out of hand. They get wiped out by a flood. We got the stories of Atlantis, advanced civilizations, wiped out by a flood. And here's some more giant mountain pictures. Really, wow, interesting. I also teach painting, and now like I've been painting a lot, so now I just whenever I just want to make a mountain in the background, I just think, okay, I'm just gonna paint a giant face or a giant tree stump, and it'll look normal. It just looks normal. So it's funny. It's pretty amazing. So many of these mountains look like people, and they do have these giant mountain stuff. They have the dangly parts too, but I don't want to show you a bunch of giant dangly parts. I think I got a few of them in here, but you could search for that if you want. There's quite a few of those pictures. See, a picture like that makes me think there's multiple resets because it looks like they built a city on top of a giant. So that would indicate multiple resets. So these really big giants, they might have been from a really early reset. Or maybe not. Maybe at the time there was a mixture of really giants and all sorts of different sizes. We really don't know, but we can guess a lot. But it's fun to guess and imagine all the different scenarios and listen to all the legends and like the Norse mythologies. Fun to look up about giants. And the natives, all sorts of natives around the world have stories about giants. I remember reading a story from like India. about giants like big as continents, like really, really big giants. Big, I mean, this size big, like as we're looking at right now. In the Bible, I remember reading there's angels 55 feet tall. Pretty big. These ones are way bigger. And I remember one of my other videos I was talking about the Seth material. And they've got this story about Emar. Emar's how to use his magical powers. And it's a cute story, but there's giants in the story. And it's interesting, like the giants are speaking so loud, it's so hard to understand what they're saying just because they have these giant voices. And you can imagine if you're really, really tiny, hearing like these giants talk, what they would sound like. It's an interesting photo of Paris, 1900s, 2017. You can see how many buildings they destroyed. Just ridiculous. All over the world, USA, Paris, Russia, they destroyed so many of these beautiful buildings. Giant queen-looking lady. Lots of new pictures of giants just recently found. Found them on Facebook. A lot of great researchers on Facebook researching this subject. Thank you to all the great researchers out there. I find a lot of good photos in these mudflood Facebook groups. Giant guitar. That guy right there, there's some interesting videos of him. A lot of natives gave him all these artifacts in their town, and he collected them. He collected them over the years, and they're all these giant, oversized artifacts, and some really weird stuff. Got living giants. Arnold. So many cool pictures of giants living. A lot of these I've never seen before. Just found them. Can't even stand up. So that's again that someone commented about the oxygen theory, that there's a lot more oxygen in all these bigger trees and bigger plants everywhere. Would make sense. There's probably a lot more oxygen in the atmosphere, and it's really interesting to think about. And they successfully made bigger bugs and fish doing some experiments. Very interesting. Also, I think it's interesting too, like if you keep a goldfish in a small container, a small fish bowl, it stays small. But if you put a goldfish, same kind of goldfish, into a lake, it can get really, really big. And that's just also another interesting thing, like your body awareness of your space, surroundings. So many cool new giant pictures. I haven't seen most of these. Really, really cool. Also, if you haven't seen my last video about giants, go see it, but a little bit of review, like the Seth books. He said an advanced civilization from a different dimension, this is a channel material, they were giants, they came to our dimension, they needed to fix their DNA because their race was genetically altered, so everyone is like a fainting sheep. They cannot defend themselves, act out in an aggressive way. They just shut down, basically. And they realized this wasn't a good idea for their genetics, and so they came to our dimension. They were giants, and they mixed with the natives here to try to fix their genetics and continue to make a civilization here. They taught us all sorts of things, how to build, how to use sound technology. They were very, very advanced in sound technology. They levitated stones with a mixture of sound technology and psychic abilities. They're very advanced and skilled, their civilization and their psychic abilities. And they used a combination of physical and psychic abilities to do tasks and building things. Very, very interesting stories. So the Seth Jane Roberts is the author, channeler. Seth is a personality that came through her and told these stories. Very interesting stuff. And also the Book of Enoch is good to look up. You could it's read out loud on YouTube. The Book of the Giants is read out loud on YouTube. It's good to look up. Got all these Bible stories of giants and Goliath, and in the Bible, the Baalbek, it says Baalbek was like built by giants, and after the flood, it was like rebuilt by giants, fixed up. So that's also interesting. The Bible talks about like after the flood, there was giants. So talking about there's still giants around after the big flood. And it's interesting, the Noah's flood story is not like one story, it's a worldwide story. They have Noah's flood in China, they have same kind of flood myths all over the world. Really, really interesting. There's Goliath story. Whoa, 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 look at that picture. Looks like an executioner giants, and a guillotine. Oh, this is interesting too. Giant soldiers. These are really, I really like these ones. These are pretty cool. So this is really interesting. This looks like giants building those mounds that we've seen in my last video. Those look like like a mound, and we see in the bottom there's tiny, tiny people too. A mixture of giants and tiny people. They're very, very interesting giant natives. That was pretty cool. I like that one. Yeah, it'd be just great for more people to test more of these, like the mud fossil guy. It'd be great to see. So interesting. So like, again, he successfully got DNA results for giant fingertip and stone lung. Successfully extracted human DNA. Some giant mud fossils. We got some petrified wood, very pretty, very crystally. Oh, this is a wonderful picture. Giant books. I love this picture. I love the picture of the giant books. So neat looking. Here we got some giant mushrooms. At least rocks that look like mushrooms. We should do some tests. But there's some giant rocks that really look like petrified mushrooms. So here we go. Some giant mushrooms. Really cool looking. Giant mushrooms. Really interesting looking. With all the giant stuff that we got, it's not really surprising or that we would not find giant mushrooms. giant fossilized plants, giant turtles, and all sorts of every type of animal, just giant fossilized versions of them. Giant birds, giant bugs. We got some really giant trees, old photos. Just really giant ones. Ooh-wee. I did this for a while. Worked with some tree cutters and trimmers and cut trees down. Never cut trees down this big. So giant. Couldn't imagine. Pretty cool. Some people made houses out of these tree stumps. Really cool. The petrified wood pattern up close. Again, looks like a beehive structure. Hexagonal. Here's petrified wood. Very, very interesting. We're gonna see this in look at the mountains, but really look at this pattern. It's very interesting. There's the pattern again on a mountain. Got these giant mountains everywhere looking like trees, and some of them look like people and animals. A lot of them even have like a sawdust like around the base of it, like left over from when they cut the tree down. Some of them. We got all these stones that look kind of organically grown. Could be from some plants or trees from giant land. Again, it just looks like a tree. Really great pictures. There's some stumps and here's some mountains. There's that pattern again. There's that honey beehive structure that we saw in the close-up petrified wood pictures. There's a hexagonal petrified wood up close shapes. And here are these hexagonal petrified wood pattern. Very, very interesting. And here's a good picture of it. And the Giant's Causeway. It's got this hexagonal pattern. It really looks like a tree. Again, there's that shape again. It looks all very organic and grown. Super interesting. And there's that pattern again. That's a mountain. That's not the... That's amazing. That's exactly the same pattern as the petrified wood. And there's a picture where it looks like the sawdust left over from cutting it down. Pretty weird. Pretty interesting. Again, we got all these giant coal mines around the world with giant forests, but they're all plants that you would see on the bottom of a forest. 200-foot tall vegetation that you'd see on the bottom of a forest in coal mines all around the world. Fossilized plants, giant bugs, big as cars. You can see the rings of the tree, and notice it's not like a whole lot of rings neither. It looks like the tree grew quite fast. This giant. Giant tree mountains are everywhere. So the giant people mountains. Strange but true. Giant Egyptian sarcophagus. Egyptian, we see a lot of mixed pictures of mixed sizes going on. Sumerian right here, mixed sizes of people. We got some good pictures coming up. Got giraffes and people, and the people are tall as a giraffe. Pretty interesting here. Got little people helping out the big people. We got a few different sizes here, looks like. Real interesting. Giants helping put up build stuff. That's a great one right there. Little guy helping help your wrist help put on your jewelry. Giant helping push the boat out. Looks like a little guy handing him a giant flower to the giant. Oh, this is interesting. We got bleeding mountains everywhere. Some of them bleed into rivers and make the river bloody. This is a picture of meat close up, muscles. And then here are some mountains. Very, very similar. Looks like muscles. Very, very interesting. We got some of these mountains everywhere. Where it looks just like muscles, meat up close. Here's a rock. Looks like flesh. Pretty weird. Yeah, it's pretty weird looking. There's a picture of meat. And there's a picture of meat next to a stone. The one in front is a stone. Looks exactly like a piece of meat. This is interesting. This looks to me like fossilized metal. Very interesting. I think this is like somewhere around India, I believe. Maybe not. I might be wrong. But these are really interesting. Some of them look like they might have used to be metal, like these bell-shaped like things. Looks like the mud filled up to the top. Kind of filled them up a little bit. Yeah, it's really interesting looking. To me, it almost looks like it could be something else. What if that was a roof of something? That'd be interesting. Yeah, what if that was a roof, the top of a giant? Whoa, that's pretty weird looking. Giant. Looks like a big giant piece of meat. But it's a rock. More rock meat. So weird. Again, are these fossilized people and animals? Like from Giant Land? Could be. Who knows? Sure looks like it. More crystally meat looking rocks. And again, I told you, these giant mountains, they've got the dangly parts too. So, but I didn't add a lot of them in the video because it's just weird. You can search those out if you want. So we got these giant mountains that look like trees, giant people. We've got fossilized metal and machines. What we got here is some fossilized people. Sure looks like it. Looks like other things too. Very interesting. Looks like barrels and cloth and people and rope and all sorts of stuff. Very interesting. I read this story about a guy in a boat. He died on his boat, and people found the boat later. And when they found the guy, he was fossilized from just the water and salt water in the air. They preserved him like a stone. You could look up that story. It's real interesting. They have pictures. So that'd be a good story to look up about fossilized people. And it doesn't take long to turn a person into a stone. Some rope, pretty interesting. Yeah, it's just so funny looking at that picture. And these are all different sized giants they found in the past, and they're all in the newspaper. 36 feet, 25 feet, 23 feet, 19 feet. Again, in my last video, I go over a bunch of the giants in the newspapers. There's thousands more of these newspaper reports that I'm not showing in the video. I can literally just fill hours worth of videos just looking at the newspaper reports. And here's another bleeding mountains into rivers. It says very high in iron. Got more of these doors and windows underground as they're fixing up the building, tearing up the ground. Really interesting. Doors and windows completely underground level. You see a little bit of the window was left coming up above ground. This is a real interesting picture. More of these World Fair buildings all around the world were destroyed. A few of them survive. Some of them are government buildings now. Like libraries and all sorts of repurposing. These are some really interesting photos. Whoa, what happened here?